Badlands. Explain those Badlands. That's a hell of a name.
All right. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Why We Vote. Happy Friday to everybody out there, even though it's not really Friday right now. This is a pre-recorded show. Just letting you all know that. Joined by my all-time great co-host, Ash Epp. How you doing, Ash?
I'm good. Yeah. So it's Wednesday. So if something crazy happens Thursday or Friday, don't be all like, why aren't you guys talking about blah, blah, blah? Because it hasn't happened yet, whatever it is.
There you go. Did you get to watch the the Representative Boast hearing at SCOTUS?
No, I haven't yet. It's on my list.
It's on my list too. So this is only a couple hours after daily, so we haven't done much today at all. I just wrote a quick update article on the. Well, I mean, I'm saying like we haven't gotten
to a Colorado show and published 2 articles since daily.
Well, I did the show with Apollo and wrote an article for Gateway, so I'm on the same page, which is why none of us got to the Boast hearing yet.
Correct.
At SCOTUS. That's what I was getting at. I wasn't saying like we just took the time and like.
Well, the words you said were we haven't done much, and I feel like I haven't stopped moving since daily, so I had to.
Okay, that's fair. That's fair. When I say we haven't done much, I mean like in terms of like things we said on daily that we were going to do, which one of those would be listening to the Supreme Court hearing on Boast. I don't know why.
Yeah, but probably by the time this airs, we will have listened to it. So this whole conversation was pointless.
For sure. Very important case because it's going to deal with when candidates have standing to bring lawsuits in election cases. And hopefully we get that resolved, man, because I'll tell you what, the way that it went in 2020, albeit if it was by design, wink, wink, it had to be this way. It's concerning. So we shall see how that goes.
Yeah, when they have standing and who has standing.
Correct.
Which has been a very frustrating question for election integrity advocates over the past 5 years, right?
Yep.
6 years. And so, it'll be, there was, people forget about the 60 something cases before the 2020 election. This is solving this problem is a long time coming. So looking forward to listening to that. I will probably do it sometime later today.
Yep. All right. So let's get into our sponsors for today's show. First up, is your wealth ready for Trump's next wave? Gold loves a Trump headline, and it's soaring from the day he first took office. Gold prices have climbed, gaining nearly $400 an ounce. It's way more than that, by the way. It's closer to like $1,300 an ounce that it's gained as it passes $4,000 again today. Yesterday, for the first time on Tuesday. On Wednesday, it surpassed 4,000 again. It dipped down a little bit. It's kicking ass. Why? Because gold thrives in uncertainty. It's a time-tested safe haven, immune to government meddling, a shield against inflation, and a proven way to protect your wealth when markets wobble. With Trump's second term heating up, will gold smash new records in 2025? It already has. Nobody knows how high it could go, but smart investors aren't waiting to find out. Take control today. You could even qualify for up to 10% bonus in free silver. Discover an IRS-approved way to diversify your savings with gold and silver. Tax and penalty free. Get your free gold and silver kit delivered straight to your door and learn how to safeguard your future. Visit badlandsgold.com to claim your kit and start building a stronger portfolio today. Again, that's badlandsgold.com. Don't miss out. All right.
Don't miss out.
Yeah, and then let's talk about our friends over at Badlands Health.
You could make the argument that the more pharmaceuticals we have, the sicker we get. The more statins prescribed, the more heart disease there is, the more metformin taken, the more diabetes. And trust me, the more Ozempic we take, the more obese we'll get. That's because you cannot medicate a lifestyle disease. But 20 years ago, a study was done on a breakthrough, natural alternative that naturally helps the body shed excess fat. It naturally helps improve metabolic health. There are no drugs in it. It's Big Pharma's worst nightmare, and it's guaranteed to solve the problem. Head to badlandshealth.com to get started.
All right, badlandshealth.com. And on today's episode, we are going to continue on with the Venezuelan testimony that we covered last week, and we got part 2. So this was divided up into 2 parts because the guy testifying had to disappear for some reason. I'm not sure why, but on the same day,
another appointment. I think they said.
Yeah, he had an appointment, I think, and so this is the same day, and everything else in the state of Florida that the court transcriber is at the stenographer is in Florida. So I'm assuming this took place in Florida.
It says it did on the filing. It says it's in Florida. Yeah.
Well, yeah, but that's where the stenographer is. You could still have, like with the remote stuff that they're doing nowadays, the stenographer could be in Florida, but the court could be in DC or Colorado or wherever. But anyways, it's most likely in Florida. That's where Smartmatic is based, out of Boca Raton. So we'll dive right into this. I'll tell you what, I'm not going to do the accent because, man, I got some hate for that. And I was like, you guys have
haters going to hate. I thought it was delightful.
I
got a little North Korean at times, but it was good.
It was all over the place. I am not an accentuator. I don't know. I'm making that up. That's a totally made up term. But if you've never watched like Ash and I, when we do Badlands book club, or like anytime that we're reading transcripts or anything like this, we always do funny accents. So if you're pissed about that, yeah, exactly. It's more fun. We're going to have a little bit of fun doing this. People are like, oh, this is a very serious transcript. Yeah. Is it? It's just a transcript for right now, unless anything comes of it.
The substance of it is serious in the context of national security, but the shit show through which we've attempted to get this information into a court of law means the funny accents are warranted.
Yeah, well, that's the point, is like this, even then on its face, this testimony is nothing more than sworn testimony from an alleged whistleblower who nobody knows. And so, until these claims are corroborated, verified, backed up. But the problem is what's the avenue to get to that? Well, like, how do we take this sworn testimony and say, hey, this guy has a, direct knowledge of all of this. He's telling us this is the case. Maybe we should look at this. It's critical infrastructure. Maybe we should look at this and take, have a look under the hood. And nobody ever seems to want to. Why? Because they're beneficiaries of it.
Because they know.
Yep.
It's, first of all, the not looking gives them plausible deniability. Well, we haven't seen any evidence of. Yeah, because you haven't looked, because you refused to look, right? That was a big part of, that always makes me think of not just the Phil Davis stuff that we went through, but the Halderman report when it was first leaked out. Remember that whole season? And it was the 13 things, but they never looked beyond the 13 things. It was, these 13 things are known and we've, taken steps, blah, blah, blah. And that's how it gets plausible deniability. But the other side of that is, the plausible deniability is the public facing story part. The reality is that they know.
Yep.
They know. They're all a part of the EI-ISAC and the MS-ISAC and all of the different advisory committees that give them all of the information about the industry and the state of cybersecurity. And yet they pretend they don't know. We haven't seen any evidence of that. Well, which is also oftentimes a lie. Right, because we know from the Yehuda Miller spear phishing release that at the time they were telling us that the elections were the most secure in history and there was absolutely no evidence of any problem. They were also behind the scenes sending traffic limited protocol emails, restricted access to those EI-ISAC, MS-ISAC people to say, hey, 70-something% of our devices are vulnerable to this attack.
Yep.
But we can't say that they've been exploited because there's no evidence of that. But also, we haven't looked.
All right, you want to get started?
So again, playing the role of John Case today. Brian will be the Venezuelan again.
Yeah, we'll do. I'm going to do the accent. No, I'm not.
I think maybe selective. If there's like a biblioteca reference or something.
There you go. I'll just speak in Spanish. I'll read the whole thing in Spanish. You guys will be.
All right. Here we go. Sir, I am here because my client, Tina Peters, was prosecuted by the government in Colorado for criticizing the voting system in Colorado. In your experience, let me start the question over. I'm here because my client, Tina Peters, was prosecuted by the state of Colorado for criticizing the voting system. There is evidence that Dominion Voting Systems demanded that Tina Peters be prosecuted because she criticized the voting system and made a forensic image of the election management server. In your experience as part of the Venezuelan government, were you aware of the Venezuelan government prosecuting people who criticized the Smartmatic voting system?
Sí. They have been prosecuted. People have been prosecuted for criticizing the voting system.
Did Smartmatic participate in helping the government prosecute those people who criticize the Smartmatic voting system?
C. The electoral technology companies have turned over evidence as requested by the government.
And in your experience, were the judges who oversaw those prosecutions able to know if the evidence provided by Smartmatic was true or false?
No, they do not have that capacity. They would have to be specialists in technology to know, sir.
So the judges in Venezuela had to rely on the witnesses provided by Smartmatic in the prosecution of people who criticize the voting system.
Correcto.
That's
provided.
Crazy.
Yeah, I know. Provided by them for the government. Correct.
Yeah, and just before we move on from that question, that is also on a micro what happened to Tina Peters in her case. They had this novel, they cobbled together COVID rule violations and backward looking statutes and came up with this novel legal violation, and they had to bring in the Caleb Thornton from the Secretary of State's office to testify to the jury about how these COVID rule violations cobbled together in the way that they did it really does constitute a violation of the law. Now, Caleb Thornton of CDOS was one of the aggrieved parties of the alleged, the harm that was done to Tina Peters was to Secretary of State's office, but they qualified him as an expert to explain to the jury. So yeah, relying on this nasty shit.
Yeah, that was.
Now, when you worked for the Venezuelan government between 2003 and 2016, did you meet with any officials who were from Cuba?
Yes, on many occasions.
And how is it that you met with Cuban officials on many occasions in your role in managing the Smartmatic voting system in Venezuela? Where did you meet with Cubans?
Well, this is because the Cuban officials or Cuban authorities are part of the Venezuelan government. They have full oversight of the activities carried out by the Venezuelan government and provide advice or consulting to them.
I feel like your character would say Cuba and Cuban.
Cuba libre. Viva Cuba
do you know if Cuba has a communist government?
Yes, it does.
So you are saying that the Venezuelan government is managed by representatives of the Cuban communist government?
Correct.
And do you know if the engineers for Smartmatic, who later became employees of Dominion, were trained in Cuba to write election software for Smartmatic?
No, I'm not aware of that. What I am aware of is that Cuban engineers traveled over to Venezuela to obtain training as far as technology was concerned, not only electoral technology, but also for public records, such as birth certificates. They received training in biometric technology, passports, and to implement Cuban systems within the government. When I refer to Cuban systems, I'm referring to telecommunications and intelligence systems. And what they would explain to us was that given the blockade or embargo that they are going through, they don't have access to those tools that Venezuelans ends up giving them. But as far as elections are concerned, or electoral speaking, all the technicians or engineers that created the election system have all graduated from a Venezuelan university called Simón Bolívar University.
Universidad.
It says university. I don't want to piss anybody off because we have some very sensitive people that watch this show.
Universidad. Now, when you were working for the Venezuelan government between 2003 and 2016, what part of your responsibility to manage the manufacturing of the voting equipment?
Well, the manufacturing of the voting equipment, these were manufactured in Taiwan and China. My responsibility was to receive those components or those pieces of equipment, configure them, and send them out to production to be used through the elections, meaning that any part or piece that was given to me was exported from either China or Taiwan.
Did that include firmware in the computers?
Yeah, they would already come pre-configured from Taiwan or China. It's already been established based on the part on the part that you're acquiring. And if there's any modification made to them, then the engineers of Smartmatic would be the ones to do so. Or if it would be the case, another company, like in the case of Dominion. But based on my experience, the components are first tested in the warehouse where they have been manufactured, which means either in China or in Taiwan.
What is firmware?
The firmware is a program that is included inside a chip or a particular device for the correct functioning of the entire device. It's the first electrical impulse that the computer receives, so that then after that, it can start receiving the instructions from the operating system.
So firmware is a set of commands embedded in the hardware?
Correct.
And those commands that were used in Smartmatic computers were installed in either China or Taiwan?
Correct. But you don't want to be mixed up, though, and mix this up with the electoral system. The electoral system later on needs to be set up on this equipment. So the electronic devices have some certain command sequences, and that is why we're calling firmware. Part of that are memory sequences that allow you to receive video or print that later on allows you to receive other information. It is later after this that you sign the electoral management system, signal the electoral management system, the electoral system, and that has a command sequence where you can utilize a program or a piece of software.
Do the computers made in China and Taiwan include circuits that can communicate with the internet?
Correct. They have internal modems that allow for external communications, and it is the responsibility of each one of the different corporations to disable those components or to leave them enabled for the elections.
Now, can the firmware keep those modems enabled even if the software commands the system to disable the modem? In other words, can you have firmware that allows the modem to remain on even when the software thinks that it's off?
Yes. Well, for that, you would need an engineer that understands the Windows pipeline system, which will allow you to block certain parameters within the system. But through the operating system, then I can enable that component. In other words, yes, the answer to your question is yes.
When did Smartmatic acquire Sequoia? What year?
2005, its first year of existence. Smartmatic did so during the first year of corporate existence.
And were you involved as an official of the Venezuelan government? Were you involved in Smartmatic's acquisition of Sequoia?
No.
What year did Dominion Voting Systems acquire Sequoia from Smartmatic?
2010.
Are you aware of a Smartmatic official bribing a government representative in the Philippines during an election?
Real quick, I want to go back to the 2010 thing because I talk about this all the time. And just for anybody that might not know this, the 2010 divestiture of Sequoia from, I think it was ES&S, or am I thinking of Diebold? I might be thinking of Diebold. Yeah, scratch that. Go ahead, read that again, Ash. I'm sorry.
Are you aware of a Smartmatic official bribing a government representative in the Philippines during an election?
Well, there's an open case. It's pending against Roger Piñate for bribery during the 2016 election in the Philippines. I mean, I'm just talking about publicly known for cases of bribery. Because in Venezuela, Smartmatic worked hand in hand with the Venezuelan government, and George Rodriguez would collect bribes from Smartmatic.
And Jorge Rodriguez was part of the Venezuelan government?
He's the current president of Congress in Venezuela. We call it the National Assembly, and his sister's the vice president for the country. And it is George Rodriguez who hired Smartmatic or awarded the Smartmatic in 2003 in order for them to develop the electoral system for Venezuela.
And how much money did Smartmatic receive from the Venezuelan government in 2003 to develop the software to rig elections in Venezuela?
250,000 American dollars, and they held 28% interest in the company.
So the Venezuelan government owns 28% of Smartmatic?
As far as publicly available information, yes. And during 2003 and 2004, Smartmatic had a sister company. It was called BizTA. So BizTA created the system and Smartmatic was running the elections, and the business partners for each one of these companies are correspondingly the same person. And both of those companies were recorded or incorporated here in the state of Delaware.
Here in the state of Delaware. That's interesting. Maybe it just means here in America, but in the state of Delaware.
It means here. Well, yeah, I think it means here in America in the state of Delaware, which, you know, I mentioned this when we read it before, that Delaware is a very favorable place to incorporate businesses.
Yes.
You know? So it's not like Delaware, Joe Biden. Don't think too much into that.
Who owned the source code used in Smartmatic software?
The Venezuelan government.
And where is the source code kept?
In Venezuela.
In what city?
In the central bank. That's where they would keep the backups for the source codes in Caracas.
How much money per year did the Venezuelan government pay to Smartmatic after Smartmatic developed the software to rig Venezuelan elections?
Well, it is varied by year. During the first year, Smartmatic received $140 million. That was 2004.
In U.S. dollars?
Everything's dollars. I'm only talking dollars. In 2005, Smartmatic purchased Sequoia for $17 million. So it was basically a business. Yeah, right. And it was a very strange because Sequoia Voting Systems was a company that had 20% of the market share of the American market in the United States market.
And so from the $140 million that Smartmatic received from the Venezuelan government, then did Smartmatic pay bribes out of that money to officials in the Venezuelan government?
Correct.
And how do you know this?
So in 2004, well, in 2002 was when the first election machines were purchased in Venezuela. The contract for the first batch of machines, contract for $40 million, authorized by George Rodriguez. And then Olivetti, after a scandal became public, goes ahead and publishes the real cost of those machines in Italy, which was $21 million. So add another $19 million on top of that. Those were to pay the bribes to the people within the Venezuelan government. And this was explained by George Rodriguez himself in a meeting where I was present because I worked there. We were part of the technical team for the National Electoral Council for the coordination of all the elections.
I want to ask you a few questions about log files. Can you tell us what a log file is?
Okay, before we move on to that, I just want to touch on this real quick. So Olivetti was a politician in Italy, and historically, the family was big in telecoms. And I dug into this guy just a little bit, and I'm going off my memory here, but kind of like the equivalent of like a AT&T kind of thing over there. And it seems like what happened here was they sold the $21 million worth of machines to Italy, but they told the Venezuelan people that it was $40 million, and then 19 million of that was distributed within Venezuela to pay people off as bribes. And Olivetti, when he saw that it cost $40 million and there was, scandal behind it, he came out and said, hey, we only paid 21 million. So where did the other 19 million go? So I thought that was pretty interesting and worth noting there.
Can you tell us what a log file is?
A log on an IT level and anywhere is a record of what each one of the machines is doing. It's the absolute evidence that a machine has performed a certain process, and that record must be maintained in order for you to be able to verify if any sort of equipment is functioning properly.
Pause for a second. That is also a condition of HAVA, the log files and the preservation. If we're going to use machines, we have to have log files. This is also, pay close attention, folks, because this is why when we talk to Phil Davis and other folks about the system logs being manipulated, or the Dallas Schroeder event where they can pause the event, they can pause the election event, check the results, come back, and it'll show that it was paused, but it won't show in the log file what they did while it was paused. That's the log files are critically important records of the election. And as he said, they must be maintained in order for you to be able to verify if the equipment is functioning properly. Without the log files, you have no idea what's happening inside of that machine. That's also why it's so criminal that they use EMS admin and share credentials.
Yes, absolutely. This not only applies to a piece of equipment, but also to a system, a software, because you have operating system logs that tell you about the components within the machines, and they are system logs, which inform me about the behavior of a system. In my computer or electoral system, it uses systems I will have 7 different logs.
Did the Smartmatic computer voting system, what was the operating system? Windows?
For the voting machines, yes, it was Windows. The tally system or vote counting system had been built on Linux. But it doesn't mean that because you have a change in the operating system, you can't maintain the logic within the systems.
So did you examined the forensic image of the election management server that was used in Mesa County 2020 election, correct?
Correct.
Did you notice the settings on the size of the Windows log files in the Windows operating system?
I don't recall, but it is part of the report that we created, and I can get that to you. But I seem to remember that it was too small. The size was too small for what it needed to do. When I talk about size, when I talk about small in size or very little space, I mean that on a programming level. You can assign a certain disk space or memory space for the logs to be stored in, and that's going to give you an X number of lines so that a log or record can be kept. And depending on what that setting is, once the log gets full, it starts rewriting over it and deleting evidence. That is why I believe their settings were too small. And we talked about this with our team, and we thought that it wasn't going to have enough space to be able to keep all the logs throughout the election. In the case of Venezuela, elections are just one day, but in the United States, elections last over 20 days. Therefore, the space allocation for the logs have to be large enough to be able to allow for the storage of all the different days or activities during the days of the election. And that evidence or logs should be kept as a backup in a database. Those are the standard procedures that should be followed.
Now, are you familiar with the manual for the Dominion voting systems?
Yes, we read the voting system manual, and it has many chapters because there's a manual for each module of the system.
Now, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but if I can remind you does the Dominion voting system manual that you read with your own eyes specifically to set the specify to set the log file size at 20 megabytes?
I believe so.
And in the event that 20 megabyte file fills up with information, then does the Dominion manual allow you to designate what should happen next when that file gets full?
No, it does not say so, because the Dominion manual only tells you how to set that setting. The manual has no instructions on how to solve problems that could occur during a given election. And the only way for you to verify that a log record has been poorly configured is for someone to point out that the log files have been being rewritten. But I believe that in the United States, and I have to read a whole deal regarding this, that there is no manual for the monitoring for the electoral systems within the United States, nor does the Dominion system issue any sort of alert or notification if the system is full. If there's any error, they would have to create a support ticket and call support. And then these people would come and be in charge of resolving the issue by either sending a technician or by remote support. And we saw that in Coffee County.
And that's crazy.
Yeah.
It's crazy that it doesn't even alert you. So your system log, which is a regulatory requirement under HAVA that you're maintaining system logs, the system is set up ostensibly at 20 megabytes, and that's not big enough to capture the entire election event. So it's going to overwrite itself, and as the witness said, delete evidence during the course of the election event. It's overwriting prior log files. And remember, our election events are like a month long, right? Because of early voting and all the posts and everything. And then the system doesn't even notify you if you're full, and it's going to start deleting evidence in opposition to the regulatory requirements that you have to preserve that information. And the system isn't going to tell you that. Plausible deniability.
You remember, and we've seen some examples of this. Maricopa County, for example, where they query bombed the login credentials and deleted like 20,000 some odd records before they did the audit. And keep in mind who had access to those machines before Cyber Ninjas and Ben Cotton had access to them. And that was ProVNV came in and did a quote unquote forensic audit on the machines before the Senate approved audit. They did one on their own. God only knows what they did in there. But Logan found that query bomb in there that erased, basically all the login attempts because of, first in, first out.
And what did they do? They demonized Doug Logan.
Yeah, right. And they belittled Logan. Not only that, there was another case where, obviously we had the Dallas Schroeder story that Ash and I broke here on Why We Vote, where they showed him that the machines can act without taking logs.
The Dominion representative showed him that they can pause the election event, check the results, and then start the election. The results, not the turnout, not the number of voters, not the processing, not anything. The results of the races and the ballot measures. They can check them. Then they can start the election event. The log file shows you that they paused the election event and restarted it, which isn't going to be an indicator because they do that like every night before they go home, right? They'll pause it and then they'll restart it the next day. But the log file does not tell you what they did in between the times where they paused it and restarted it. And that is by design.
Yep. 100%. 100%.
Criminal.
Right. And then on top of that, when I did my FOIA requests in Floyd County, Georgia, because they found like 3,600 ballots during the hand recount, and I thought that was extremely bizarre. When they sent me the log files for their machines, they sent me like I can't remember the specific dates, but it was the beginning of election day, which I want to say was like October 16th. All the way up through like October 23rd or something like that. And then they completely skipped over all of election day. I didn't get any of the election day records, and then picked back up on November 26th when they started machine count number 2. So not only do they overwrite and have a very limited, amount of space, they can go in and pick and choose what the system logs they send you. And when I raised this to them and started getting like pretty pissed at them because they're clearly deliberately doing this, has to be deliberate to go in the middle. And take out a section from the middle, they started threatening me. And I was like, well, not threatening, but they started getting feisty with me. We'll just say that. All right, let's read on.
Because they always punish the people that are pointing out their crime.
Yeah.
Now, if the voting system isn't connected to the internet, how could a Dominion technician possibly communicate and get into the system other than through the internet? Other than through what now? The internet.
Well, then the representatives for each county have to create a VPN connection so that the representatives can then be connected to the electoral systems. As I've read in the certain reports that that's the case, this has happened in Chicago, Illinois, and in Georgia. The Georgia case is, I believe, Coffee County, which, remember.
Is that the one where they called the help desk in Colorado Springs?
We don't know who they called. That's the one where they called a Dominion technician, or they told the Dominion technician on site, get this fixed. He went outside, called somebody, came back inside and said, okay, your machine's fixed. Never touched the machine and just said, okay, your machine's fixed. And well, no, he said wipe the lens, which they'd already done numerous times. Wipe the lens and now it should be good to go, as if, to say that's the excuse for why it's good to go. Now, when that happened, the Democrat observer and Kathy Latham, the GOP observer, both looked at each other like, did we just see what we think we saw? Meaning this thing was fixed without any type of connection. Remotely. And
go ahead.
Well, and on top of that, I had Jeff Ledenberg, who was one of the gentlemen that did the analysis of the system there. And when he was testing, he found out that these Dominion machines have an option in them to read, I think it was read blue, read red, and read green only, meaning reading those colors. And he didn't specify, I don't think, I'd have to go back and watch it, specifically what that means. But when he started playing with those parameters, there was an exceptionally skewed number of Trump votes that would get rejected when it said read, I think it was read blue or ignore blue. It was one of those two options. But there was a literal setting in the machine that if you changed it, it would not register Trump votes. I'll have to go back and maybe for next week play that clip again.
Yeah, on 2020 election day, there was a report, and I think it was on the radio that I heard it, that there was, and it was here. I heard it here, but it was about Georgia, that one of the counties in Georgia, or one of the precincts, had opened up their equipment to get everything set up, and they had the wrong precinct loaded on their devices, on their BMDs. And so they had to call the help desk. And the reason it was a story here is because the help desk that they called was in Colorado Springs. It was a Dominion help desk that they called in Colorado Springs. And then they resolved the problem. And that raised a ton of questions, right? Like how did a Colorado, help desk solve a problem with the wrong precincts being loaded on devices in Georgia if they weren't able to access and fix the problem remotely? How did they solve that problem? But that story came up once and then never again.
And I know which one you're talking about. I want to say it was Spalding County, but I could be wrong on that. That clerk got fired. Got fired
naturally for pointing it out.
Yeah,
because they always punish the people who point out their corruption.
Yeah, and the highlighted part on this portion where it says Georgia, again, I'm referring to Coffee County on that, and I just want to point out again that Coffee County had Kathy Latham had text messages with Brad Raffensperger and Gabriel Sterling before the election, the runoff. This was the runoff, not the 2020 election. Before the runoff, saying that, hey, our machines are not functioning properly. This specific one, we need to get a new machine. You need to get us a new one. Raffensperger passed her off to Sterling. Sterling basically said, you're going to have to buy one. You're going to have to pay for a whole new machine if you want to get a new machine. And so Coffee County went to a neighboring county and borrowed their machine, one of their machines, to do the election in Coffee County. So,
crazy.
All right, reading on, it says in the case of Georgia as well, they have set up VPN connections in order to resolve issues as far as settings were concerned or to resolve system problems. They can use a virtual machine that is put in the middle. State Election Board 2023-025, 10 phantom machines. When I say that it's in the middle, it means that over here, on one hand, you have the county's electoral system. Then you can configure a virtual machine in the county that would allow for the elections to be made. And you provide it with the necessary credentials or authorizations so that the electoral system can then communicate with this machine. And then the company in turn connects to the virtual machine. So legally speaking, they're not connected directly to the electoral system, but nevertheless, from this other system, I can affect changes in the system to update it. Either that, or I can just do a direct connection through a VPN and do all the changes that I need. You need to have one person in that county to have the authorization of the Secretary of State. I mean, that's what I am. I think that's the case. based on what I have read about this, but I don't really know whether a Secretary of State is the maximum authority or not during an ongoing election.
Now, is what you just described called the man in the middle program?
Correct.
And is the man in the middle system used in Venezuela?
It was not used in Venezuela because Smartmatic had full control of the election system. It was not necessary, nor was the government going to sue Smartmatic. From the government is not going to sue Smartmatic since they are working for them. And just on a side note, like an anecdote, the elections for the 2006 election in the United States in Chicago, Illinois, the proof of concept for that election was created in Venezuela in 2005. That is why a very similar piece of equipment was used. It was the SAES 3300. It's an identical machine to the SAES 3377 that were used for the elections here in the United States. So at all times was what Venezuela used as proof of concept for the different elections that Smartmatic carried out throughout the entire world.
So are you saying that the man in the middle system was used in Chicago in the 2006 election?
No, it is used currently in these last elections that you had held here. Dominion has an engineer whose name is Ronald Morales, and Ronald Morales is the person that does maintenance on the electoral systems. Ronald Morales is the person that puts that man in the middle in place. Sorry, that's not the word. To be able to set up the system, to be able to set up the communication from the Dominion system between the new Dominion system and the old Smartmatic system, but it's the same behavior.
I'm sorry, you cut out, Mr. Vega.
They have used it elsewhere as well.
So is there a problem when the computer equipment changed and became more modern and Dominion was still running the old Smartmatic based software on the new computer equipment coming out of the China and Taiwan?
Correct. They use that because they need the county to authorize certain updates on the system. So for example, in the case of Mesa, let's see, I was 5.11. Okay, so the 2020 election was done with version 5.5. And then they updated the system to version 5.11. When they did that update, all the old data was deleted because they are overridden. It is written on top of that. So at that point in time, you can no longer carry out a formal audit because you no longer have the original machine. All evidence, all log, all of that was deleted.
And do you think that's the trusted build?
Probably, yes. I would think to say, yeah.
So what they say, just so we're representing all sides of this thing, right? What the Secretary of State, and this is Mesa, so what Jenna Griswold and her office would say, she would just parrot it because she doesn't know things. She just says what she's told to say. But what they would say is, well, we back up everything that's required to be backed up. But as we know, they overwrite log files. And log files under Java are required to be backed up. So they're lying. Also, even they say it, we back up everything required to be backed up under the law. They never actually show any proof of that or chain of custody on that.
Yeah, and real quick, something I want to point out going back to the Dallas Schroeder, and I apologize if you said this because I was trying to pull up the DOJ divestiture article to cover at the end of this, but one of the things I think is important to know about Colorado elections, based on when you consider what we talked about with Schroeder being able to see the results from early balloting before it's scanned in, is now in Colorado it's law, or is it law or rule that you have to scan early ballots before election day?
That I think is part of rules.
Okay.
And that rule I think came about because of Dallas and Rhonda in Elbert, right? Because Elbert is a small county. They only have like 8,000 voters or something like that. And they were waiting until election day to count their ballots, and they were fine. They were finishing on election night. Everything was fine. But the state directed babysitter that came in to watch their elections, because they've been harassed by the Secretary of State's office in Elbert County for years at this point. The babysitter that came in, the auditor person that came in to watch, said that it was a threat. It's a problem. This could be a problem. You could be denying people their right to vote by not counting votes and before election day. And they mandated it in the rules that, violating rules can get you 9 years in prison. So
yeah,
that's the weight of law.
So just what was there's a population minimum that you have to have before that rule kicks in. Is it 5,000 or was it 20,000? I
don't know, but I can look it up real quick.
Yeah. And again, the point is that if you're requiring counties to pre-scan ballots beforehand, and that there's the capability of internet access, not just like flagrantly internet accessible, like Ash has pointed out with her memo from the Secretary of State saying, make sure your computers aren't connected to the internet.
Not my memo. I just broke the
Right.
story and then got no credit for it.
But we now know, according to, excuse me, I've given you credit every time I've used
Not
that.
you. I don't mean you.
Oh.
70,000 is the threshold for a large
Minimum?
county versus small county. The rule to count before election day applies to all counties.
Oh, it does? I thought it was only if you're a certain size.
No, there are different rules in terms of the things that machines have to be used for and stuff when you get to that 70,000 threshold.
Oh, okay. So yeah, again, I mean, if you're counting all of them beforehand and, there's internet access to machine remote capabilities, even if the clerk isn't deliberately checking the results ahead of time, there are entities, whether it's, above the clerk, whether it's CDOS, Colorado Department of State, or beyond that are able to inquire as to what the current results are before the election has even taken place. That's absolutely insane. That is one of the most insane things I can imagine when it comes to the elections. But anyways, all right.
And what you've just referred to is when the Colorado Secretary of State performed what's called the trusted build in Mesa County on May 25th and 26th of 2021. The Secretary of State erased all of the records of the 2020 election that was preserved on that Mesa County election management server. Is that correct? A trusted build? Is that right, Council? Yes.
Correcto. I didn't know the dates that you were mentioning, but yes, that is correct.
So you examined the image of the Mesa County election management server that was taken after the trusted build. Is that correct?
No, we saw both images, the old one and the new one. Correct.
Correct. And the new, that was my correct. Stop stealing my lines.
Correct.
In the new image, all of the data was gone except new software. True?
And the structure changed. The structure of the program changed as compared to the version 5.5.
Now, so far as you are aware, is it a law that the system must preserve the records from the previous election for a certain period of time?
I believe it's 18 months.
Just so the record's clear, are you aware of 52 U.S. Code Section 20701, which requires every officer of election to preserve all records, including electronic records, for 22 months after each election?
Correct. Yes, we knew that.
And based on your examination of the forensic images of Mesa County, what's your testimony that the Colorado Secretary of State erased all records of the 2020 election when they installed the new software in May of 2021? Is that true?
Well, whoever gave the authorization for the system to be updated would be the person responsible for all the files being deleted. That's a federal crime. If the person giving the green light was the Secretary of State, then it would be the Secretary of State. If it was the person in charge of the elections, then it would be the person in charge of the elections. And that's
now going back to the what?
That statement right there alone is why Tina should be out of prison and Jenna Griswold should be in prison.
Yeah, and this whistleblower deposition is happening in the pursuit of getting her out of prison, because if what she says is true, then it's even more egregious that they are holding her in prison because what she will say is dangerous.
Yeah. And I mean, whether or not you believe the rest of this testimony, because it does still need to be, corroborated further. But this one statement right here is absolutely 100% correct, that the Secretary of State authorized it with no intention of backing up the system, and data was deleted within the window of not just retention for federal law, but for Colorado law as well.
Yeah. And just to the point about, this needs to be corroborated. I kind of see this the opposite way. I think that this whistleblower, and we don't know, Brian and I have not verified who this whistleblower is and cannot speak to his credibility, right? But they are filing this in a court of law under pain and penalty of perjury. He's under oath as he's speaking, and he's been properly credentialized for the record. So like the court, because the court has to take what he's saying as true unless it's proven to be false, we're going to take it as true. And to me, the whistleblower then corroborates the Mesa reports. He's confirming what is said by U.S. experts, Doug Gould, William Doherty, Jeff O'Donnell, right? Experts in their fields who have examined and written reports. And, those reports have been submitted in courts of law as well under pain and penalty of perjury. That's been a part of the record since 2022. And this whistleblower testimony is confirming it. So I see it as this is the confirmation. But to your point, the whistleblower has to be properly authenticated for,
Correct.
outside of the deposition. Yeah. Now going back to the log file size.
Okay.
What you've told us is that the Dominion system was configured so that when the log files go full, they just overwrote the information that was already in the log file. True?
Of course, these are standard settings and standard configurations.
So while the system was operating during the 2020 election, it was actually writing over the data from the election?
It rewrites the day-to-day of an election. So let's say if it becomes full, then the next day gets overridden on top of that.
And so when you have an election that lasts for several days, it becomes impossible to audit the full election because the records are being erased after they are written. True?
Correct.
And so that is a capability that is built into the Dominion software, correct? That is overwrites election records while the election is going on.
Correct. If the machine is operational and it is operating, it will record on top of a log that is already there.
And that is part of the Dominion software that allows it to erase records while the election is going on. True?
Correct.
And is that the same capability in the Smartmatic software that was created in Venezuela to rig elections?
That's not how it was configured over in Venezuela. You had a dedicated server just for the logs, meaning that all the different machines or servers would send the information to one location and send the logs to one location. And there you can do a review of all the elections through all the logs stored there. It's just that in Venezuela, no one would go and want to check those logs.
Interpreter would like to make a correction. In Venezuela, no one would check those logs. Can you tell us about the multiple transmission capabilities and methods in the Venezuelan elections telecommunications system?
Can you repeat that question, please?
Yes. Can you tell us about the transmission capabilities and methods of the telecommunications system that was used in Venezuela during elections when you worked for the Venezuelan government?
So Venezuela would transmit in 3 different ways. It could be by home telephone line, active telephone lines, by cellular communication, and by satellite communication. All these divisions, depending on what part of the country you were in, were then connected to the voting machines through network port, an RJ45 jack, or an RJ11 telephone jack. And through these lines, which are secured lines, all the electoral data was transferred. And this data is transmitted through the telephone lines of the carriers in the country. So in this country, it would be the equivalent of AT&T or Verizon. Or over in Venezuela, we call it we call it CAN TV. And these networks are then connected to the National Center for Tallying or Totaling, and all the electoral data is transmitted using that method of communication.
Now, you mentioned an election that was rigged in a state. I believe you said Merida. Is that correct?
In Merida, Merida. So it turns out the results of the entire state of Merida were not transmitted throughout the country. They used the tool SAES, data utility tool, to transmit all the data from the electoral machines and transmit them to the National Center for Tallying. And this became public knowledge because when the logs for those different communication companies were checked, there wasn't any sort of trace or data packets that were being transmitted. So this triggered a red flag, and the National Tallying Center was contacted, where they said the state of Merida had already sent all the entire transmission of 100% of the issues, which is impossible because they didn't use any of the regular channels or transmissions that are being used during the elections or that are authorized to be used during the elections. It's as if you ordered a package and instead of it being delivered through your front door, it came in through your window. It's the same thing, the same exact thing. And this is how it happened in Venezuela. And the person responsible for doing that was Carlos Quintero. He was the technology director for the National Electoral Council. During that specific election, his sister ended up being elected as mayor. Wow. So this whole operation was done in order for his sister to get a position within the government. And pause there for a minute. I just want to remind everybody of December 25th, 2020, when a strange man who had no criminal record and had a weird, lifestyle, but nothing bizarre, went out and parked his RV in front of an AT&T data center in Nashville, Tennessee. That was the routing hub, I believe, for Georgia, and detonated a bomb in his RV. But it was a very friendly terrorist attack. No, Christmas. It was a very friendly terrorist attack because he had a loudspeaker playing "Get Out, Back Up" and all this other stuff, and it was really interesting. And of course, it was right next to the AT&T building. And by the way, just throwing this out there, who was the chairman of the board for AT&T in 2020? William Kennard. William Kennard was a Obama FCC chairman, and he was also a chairman, and this is long buried, but I have the receipts on this. He was also a chairman for Staple Street Capital. He was on the board.
No shit.
And who owns
That's Dominion's owner?
Dominion's owner.
Yeah.
William Card.
Wow.
Yep. And all of that got buried, by the way. You can still find it. He was also with Carlyle Group and all these other organizations. And yeah.
Carlyle Group, like the guys that did 9/11?
9/11? Yep, that Carlyle Group.
Wow.
Yep. It's a wicked
web. Almost like the group of co-conspirators is much smaller than, we've been sort of speculating. And all we actually need to do is roll up the freaking criminals.
Yep.
I want to ask you about some names of persons who were involved with Smartmatic and Sequoia and Dominion. And then if you can tell us what you know about each of those persons, please keep it to a brief summary unless I ask a follow-up.
Okay.
Do you know Ronald Morales?
He's a Smartmatic tech who was in Venezuela, Sequoia, and in Dominion as well.
Does he currently work for Dominion?
He currently works for Dominion.
Was Mr. Morales one of the developers of the original Smartmatic election software?
Correct.
And was that the same Smartmatic software that was used to rig elections in Venezuela?
Correct.
Do you know David Moreno?
Oh, David Moreno. The same thing goes for David Moreno. He was a specialist technician who used to be in Venezuela, then later on went to Mexico. Then in 2004, ended up being transferred over to Sequoia. In 2005, when it took over, he became part of Dominion.
Is Mr. Moreno currently employed by Dominion?
He's in charge. He's in charge of Dominion's warehouse in Texas, if I'm not mistaken. In other words, he's the person responsible for configuring the Dominion equipment for their elections.
And this is the same David Moreno that was involved in creating the Smartmatic software that was used to rig elections in Venezuela?
Correct.
Do you know Ron Rosania?
No.
Do you know Heider Garcia? Sorry, counsel. How do you spell that? Heider Garcia.
Yes, Heider Garcia is the person responsible for the deployment of the electoral system in Venezuela, one of the engineers that created it, one of the leaders and person responsible for the implementation of the SAES system and its implementation of Dominion in the Philippines. He was the person in charge of reconfiguring the 78,000 machines that failed in the Philippines out of the error of Dominion systems, voting systems. And I think he's currently the person assigned to be the elections manager in Texas, the county of Dallas, Texas, and he's in charge of the elections. And that's actually incorrect. He is not. So he was in Tarrant County during the 2020 election that swung. Well, no, that's the county that swung blue for the first time in 64 years when he took over. Then from there, he had a brief stint with the EAC as a senior advisor to the EAC. Then he went to Dallas County, and now he is currently, I believe his exact title is Senior Vice President of Consumer Affairs for Hart Intercivic Voting Machines.
Oh, how nice for him.
Yeah, very nice. Lucky guy.
You mentioned 78,000 machines that were used in the Philippines. Were those scanners?
Yes, it's equipment. This is equipment similar to the equipment that you use for your elections here in the United States. They're either similar or identical.
And those scanners were configured and programmed by Dominion Voting Systems?
Dominion Voting Systems and Smartmatic. And pause for a second there because when they talk about the 78,000 machines in the Philippines, and he's saying that they're exactly the same, remember Lord Malik Brown, the president after the 2020 election, the guy that got promoted to president of Open Societies after 2020. I think it was December 6th, I think was the exact day. He is a co-founder of Smartmatic, and he was on the record in Filipino news around this time. I think it was like 2015, saying that, yes, there's an active license between Smartmatic and Dominion over the systems in there. So the exact same systems used in the Philippines, used in the United States, likely run the same licensed software that Lord Malik Brown was talking about in that interview. But John Poulos told everybody there's no relationship between Smartmatic and Dominion.
And what was the error in those 78,000 scanners that were used in the Philippine election?
Oh, I did not mention what that error was. It is worth noting. Those 78,000 had a failure 5 days prior to the elections. They had fully configured from the very beginning before they had ever been sent out and distributed throughout the different islands in the Philippines. Dominion never handed over the source code, which by law they should have delivered to the electoral authorities in the Philippines. So then Smartmatic had to come in and reconfigure a piece of the software that didn't belong to them. I think we need to understand one thing here. The electoral system used by Smartmatic in the Philippines is the same one as in Venezuela. So what Smartmatic did was that it integrated the equipment provided by Dominion into its system. And on top of that, Smartmatic was the manufacturer for the 78,000 scanners that Dominion ended up selling to the Philippines. And so Hyder Garcia went ahead and reconfigured the equipment because the know-how about what was about that was inherited from Sequoia, knowing that Sequoia has SAES built into its system in its core. That's how Smartmatic was able to come and resolve the problem that had been caused by Dominion without any issues whatsoever, because they were configuring their own system basically.
And when you say that Sequoia had SAES built into the system, do you mean that it had the SAES data utility tool built into its system?
In the case of the Philippines, yes, but you have to remember that SAES data utility tool is a tool that is outside, external to the electoral system. And the SAES system, when we say SAES, we're talking about the entire electoral system, okay?
Now, turning back to Mr. Hyder Garcia, you mentioned that he was the head of elections in Tarrant County, Texas. Is that what you said?
Dallas County, Texas.
Thank you. And thank you.
I think he's the current head of elections, the current head of the county in Dallas.
Do you know a woman named Ileana de Los Angeles?
No.
Are you aware that Hyder Garcia has been named the new president of Hart Voting Systems?
No, I did not know. And like I said, that's incorrect. He's not the president of Hart. He's a senior vice president of like consumer relations or something like that.
Do you know a person named Alex Soto Vasquez?
No.
Do you know a person named Victor Vasquez?
Victor was a director or one of the directors of Smartmatic. No, sorry, I apologize. He was a manager of a warehouse in the Philippines. I mean, Taiwan. Sorry, wait. Sorry. Victor Vasquez is a manager for Smartmatic, and he's currently been named as part of the bribery case in the Philippines, or 2016 bribery case in the Philippines. I just got mixed up with another guy called Victor Lopez, because Victor Lopez was a manager of a warehouse in Taiwan, and he was the person in charge of the manufacturing of the equipment, one of the people in charge of the manufacturing of the 78,000 scanners built for development. And that's why I got it mixed up. I apologize.
And who was Victor Lopez employed by in Taiwan?
Smartmatic.
Do you know a person named Ed Ryan Macias?
No.
What if we just take off the Ed? Do you know Ryan Macias? I bet you do. Do you know a person named Eric Coomer? Coomer. Coomer. Eric Cooper. Coomer.
All I know is that Mr. Coomer used to be the president of Sequoia and then was the president of Smartmatic United States around 0506. And I don't think that's correct either. I don't think Coomer was the president of Sequoia ever.
Yeah, not that I'm aware of. He got a cold call. He got a cold call to be a dev, is what we understood. And then he grew into his vice president of product strategy and security role. But I don't remember that.
He got a cold call while he was in a cold sweat on the ground recovering from a heroin addiction, which God bless him for recovering for it. You know, don't want to wish.
Yeah, I think it was a couple months after his withdrawals in the jail cell that he got the cold call. So, you know, that's certainly enough time to cleanse his reputation and be involved in critical infrastructure. A couple months.
But just to throw that out there for anybody that's listening that might have ever held a security clearance, and I think you do need a security clearance to be a developer on critical infrastructure, our elections in this case. Heroin use is an automatic disqualifier from
an excellent point.
It's an automatic disqualifier. When I was in the Marine Corps, cannabis was a disqualifier from holding a security clearance. And heroin use is absolutely a disqualifier because it's one of those drugs that you never really recover from. And so it's something that you can be used to manipulate people, et cetera, et cetera. And so it's shocking to me that he was cold called to do this development and nobody raised an eye at him dealing with critical infrastructure in this regard.
Yeah. And just so people are aware, it's not Brian and I saying or making up that he was cold called to join the elections industry. It's Eric Coomer saying it in his interview with Susan Dominus of New York Times Magazine, in which he was attempting to rehab his reputation with that article, and tells the whole story. He was cold called because of his engineering background or whatever, I guess, to join voting company. And what's crazy about that, like, I don't even think I ever thought about that angle before, Brian, but he was he was in prison for a DUI, And while he was in prison, he was recovering from heroin and probably some other stuff, right? Like withdrawing from heroin. That was known. It was part of the arrest record. It was. So how did he get the security clearance required to work in critical infrastructure for the United States of America? Excellent question that no one, to my knowledge, has ever answered.
Yeah, so just real quick, and just fact checking myself again, I asked the machine, can you get a security clearance if you've previously used heroin? It says, yes, sometimes it is possible to get a security clearance, even if you've previously used heroin. But approval depends on multiple factors, such as how long ago the use occurred, the frequency of use, whether addiction was present, whether treatment was completed, and your current lifestyle and behavior. So his was
2 months after a DUI for heroin.
Yeah, like he hadn't even gotten his first coin from NA yet, you know.
Yeah, no, that's an excellent question that really needs to be
You weren't allowed to bring up his drug use in Mike Lindell's defamation.
Mike Lindell was not allowed to bring up his drug use. That was blocked by the court. Yeah, the jury was not allowed to see it.
When that's a key component of how was he able to obtain a job like this with that type of background?
Yeah. Do you know a person named Anselmo Valdez?
No.
Do you know a person named Hugo Carvajal?
Hugo Carvajal is, or was what you would call here the national security advisor for President Hugo Chavez.
Do you know if Hugo Carvajal was an officer with Cuban intelligence?
The J in Spanish is an H sound, so Carvajal.
You were saying George before.
Yeah, I'm speaking in English.
You're the Venezuelan in the script.
I know, but I get yelled at if I use
You're
accent.
just going back and forth. Just going back and forth with your language standards here.
I do not. He was the highest ranking intelligence officer in Venezuela. Now, did he have contact with Cubans? Of course, because Hugo Chavez had a relationship with Cuba, and he was involved in all the investigations against the people, or about investigating the people that surrounded the president. And Carlos Quintero was the one that committed the fraud in 2008, I mentioned this to you just a few questions back, was the second in command right under Hugo Carvajal. Hugo Carvajal placed Carlos Quintero in the National Intelligence Council so he could have control over the elections.
Can you spell Carlos Quintero? Can you spell his last name, please?
Quintero, Quintero.
And your testimony is that Hugo Carvajal placed Carlos Quintero in the National Intelligence Council so Quintero would have control over Venezuelan elections?
He placed him as the technology director so he'd have control over the elections.
Did you have personal contact with Carlos Quintero?
He was my boss.
Are you aware that Hugo Carvajal has recently pleaded guilty to a drug charge in the Southern District of New York Federal District Court?
Yes.
And are you aware that Hugo, as part of his plea deal, agreed to cooperate with the U.S. Department of Justice in explaining the connection between the Venezuelan government and the drug cartels?
No, I did not know that.
Are you familiar with the Windows operating system software updates?
Yes.
And when you were in Venezuela, did you regularly supervise the regular implementation of what's called the monthly Microsoft patch?
That's correct. We had a team who was in charge of maintaining the operating systems update.
What's the monthly Microsoft patch?
Well, these are different updates that the company considers are vulnerability, and they are forced to issue this patch to avoid their systems from being penetrated maliciously. We need to understand that whenever Microsoft issues a patch or an update, it's because at that point in time, other people have already been affected and their systems have been breached. These updates don't occur just because the company is preemptively issuing them as part of their normal processes. These updates happen because somebody attacked the system and somebody went ahead and reported the issue. That's when they create a patch or an update, and people do that.
That is a really important point of there's no evidence, right? Remember that there's no evidence. We've seen no evidence that there was a breach. We have no evidence that this is this or this. Well, yeah, because it's not even only like if you look, but it has to be reported.
Right.
And
and these systems allegedly aren't connected to the internet, so they can't report them. Like, when you're on Microsoft and like your computer crashes and it's like, do you want to send Microsoft a ticket or whatever? That's where patches come from. Of other places, among other places, but that's where patches come from. You send that off to them, right? They look at your logs and they say, okay, this is what happened. We can fix it by doing this.
They'll determine from the support tickets. They'll determine the need for a patch. Then they'll develop a patch. Then they'll deploy it. But only if the issue is reported.
And every single jurisdiction that computers have been looked at, electronic voting systems have been looked at, Maricopa County, Antrim County, Georgia, the Curling v. Raffensperger case, in every situation, they're never up to date on their security updates, on their antivirus, on their, I mean, even in Georgia, when Halderman testified, when I was in the courtroom for this, he testified that the Android operating system that the Dominion machines are using in Fulton County or in Georgia the Android system is so outdated, they don't even make patches for it anymore. Like that's how
they don't need to, Brian, because we have paper ballots and risk limiting audits. And so we don't actually need to worry about breaches in our systems or even look when there's known vulnerabilities, because the experts say that risk limiting audits, which are also determined by computers, and the paper record, which is inconsistent across all jurisdictions, that's enough, which doesn't work in any other industry for any other security application. But for elections, it's totally what we need. Now, as the person responsible for the voting system machines in Venezuela, what was your procedure for handling the Microsoft patch?
For the elections, all the machines needed to go out having the latest updates. And then on top of that, the operating system for the Windows-based machines would be blocked. You use an image that does not allow anybody from modifying it. The difference with American software is that your machines are not blocked. Rather, that machines are left open and each one of its elements or components can be accessed or used. In Venezuela, we would disable and turn off all the different processes or components that are not going to be used, that are not needed for the elections. In the United States, however, I can go ahead and install a new component right on the very day of the elections. That's why in Venezuela, you want to commit a fraud, you had to use the tool SAES data utility tool. In the United States, all I need to have is access to the machine and know the vulnerabilities, either of Windows or the electoral system. And from there, you can exert an attack that is undetectable. This is fucking bonkers, man.
Yeah.
Like, this is something like I would love to get Colonel Smith's assessment on this, although he'd probably be like, this is less safe than your home computer, which I think he said before. So is Clay. But yeah, all right, keep going.
In general, would you say that Smartmatic software was designed with two principles in mind? Number one, it's easy to rig elections, and number two, it's hard to audit?
Correct.
And is the same true for Dominion software? It's easy to rig an election with it and hard to audit?
Correct.
Do you know about GEM software? That's GEMS.
A little.
What do you know about GEM software?
The little that I seem to remember is that they were integrated with Diebold, the company, and their suite of products. Later on, that suite of products were acquired by Dominion Voting Systems in 2009 or 2010. That's the only thing that I can remember right now about the GEMS company.
Now, you mentioned that elections in Venezuela were rigged using Smartmatic software. Do you know of other countries where the elections were rigged using Smartmatic software?
No, I'm not aware.
You mentioned somewhere in your testimony about IP addresses. Can you tell us a typical IP address for Taiwan?
Well, IPs go by range. Each country has a range. If I'm not mistaken, as part of our investigations, we would find some records of communications using IP addresses, some IP addresses from Taiwan. And I think this was part of, they showed in the settings or configuration of the firmware, and it was either the firmware or the EEPROM memory, that's EEPROM memory, which is a temporary memory that is located in each one of the pieces of equipment. That's what I recall right now, but I can go over the details of the investigation. Maybe it will help me remember more clearly.
Can you tell us what a ballot image is, please?
The ballot image is the scanning of a voting ballot through which you all issue your vote.
I would like to correct the prior translation of a temporary memory and would like to correct that the two a volatile memory.
This image is to be a true and correct image of the paper ballot that then later needs to be sent over to the database for it to be stored or backed up there. And that transmission, the transmission of that image or that backup may vary by county. There are some counties that may decide to only transmit the results and other counties that may decide to transmit both the results and the images. Nevertheless, all the images are stored in the flashcards that are in each of the election devices.
Thank you. We need to take a 15-minute break and then we'll finish up by 5 o'clock.
Okay, while we're taking that break, I'm being sarcastic, but I do want to show this real quick as a kind of a rerun, but a pertinent one. So they mentioned Dominion and Diebold and everything else right there. And this is the divestiture from March 8th, 2010. Justice Department requires key divestiture in election system and software, Premier Election Solutions merger. And this is ES&S right here, ES&S. divest the voting equipment system assets purchased in September 2009 from Premier Election Solution, which is Diebold, in order to restore competition. The assets to be divested include the means to produce all versions of Premier's hardware, software, and firmware used to record and tabulate votes. So the IP property is going with the system. Okay, this is not, when they tell you that there's no connection. Sidney Powell was famous in 2020 and 2021 for saying that these all ultimately have the same DNA, these systems.
Yeah.
Including the Assure 1.2
and a divestiture on paper doesn't change that, by the way.
Right, exactly. Now jump down here, and this is the part that I always think is pretty interesting. ES&S must sell the divestiture assets to a buyer approved by the department. The settlement prohibits ES&S from bidding on new voting equipment systems contracts using the Premier equipment. The department also requires that ES&S grant the divestiture buyer an opportunity to compete to provide services to Premier customers currently under contract with ES&S, giving customers the option to switch to the divestiture buyer or to remain with ES&S. The department said that this option addresses customer concerns that an outright divestiture of service contracts would disrupt the administration of upcoming primaries and general elections. ES&S must also provide access to knowledgeable Premier employees and agree to offer a supply agreement to allow the divestiture buyer time to establish its own manufacturing of voting equipment systems. The approved settlement would be in effect for 10 years. And I think that's about it for there.
What year is this?
2010.
So 10 years, 2020?
Yeah, 2020. Yep.
Yeah, it's also interesting. It says, pull that back up for a sec.
Yep.
And scroll up a little bit. The department said that today's settlement provides quick, effective relief that resolves the department's competitive concerns and enables local and state jurisdictions to obtain competitive bids for their immediate voting equipment systems needs. So they just divested to split the company apart so that we don't have an antitrust issue. We're going to split these apart and create more options. There is nothing in here, I don't believe, that deals with them having the same DNA. There's no order requiring them to have a different, they must divest of all the intellectual property, but the machine source code is not included in there. The
source code would be IP.
They're the same machines, though.
I don't disagree with that. But that the intellectual property, and this is the same thing you saw throughout all the systems. Sequoia, Smartmatic to Sequoia, Sequoia to Dominion, and so this was March of 2010, and then right after this divestiture, Dominion picked up Sequoia as well. So Dominion went from like a nobody in elections to over 50% of elections in like a matter of like 6 months.
Inorganically through acquisition.
Inorganically.
And acquisition that was
approved
required.
by Obama's DOJ.
Yeah, required by the DOJ. Yeah.
Yep.
Crazy.
And guess who was in Obama's administration at that time? William Kennard. All right, let's get back into the 15-minute break is over. You guys are done. Come back to the
15-minute break.
Deposition. Got.
All right. You have to scroll down. Sir, do you understand that you're still under oath?
Correct.
You talked about ballot images. Can ballot images be changed inside the computer?
Correct. Yes, they can.
Shout out to Phil Davis, who showed us that.
Shout out to me, who mentioned that after, shout out to Cart Candula and Halderman's kids that did it 2019 at DEF CON with the ballot images. And then Phil Davis showed the examples of it. And so did
Phil Davis, who showed the examples of it happening in the 2020 and 2024 elections.
We showed examples. I showed examples 3 years ago of it happening in Cherokee County, where they had So what they did in Cherokee is they mixed up the ballot images, and Phil talked about this on our show as well. They mixed up the ballot images, and the only way we were able to tell that this was a manipulated ballot image is because somebody wrote on the ballot as well. Yeah. And we found their handwriting from batch to batch, and we're able to compare that the handwriting that they added to the top right hand corner was exactly the same. And from the first ballot scan to the second ballot scan, the image picked up a vote for Joe Jorgensen when the original vote was for Donald Trump, filled in by hand. On the second ballot image, it picked up a vote for Joe Jorgensen that was perfectly filled in oval.
Wow.
Yep.
But the core of the ballot itself was the same, and you know that because of the handwriting on it.
Because of the handwriting, and you can't take them and compare them side by side because they shuffle them. They deliberately shuffle them so that you cannot compare.
And Phil Davis showed us that it's very complicated how they shuffled them, right? Like intended to be undetectable. And is that true that ballot images can be manipulated inside the machine? Is that true with Dominion software?
You would have to use Dominion software. You would have to use Dominion software to be able to do a change or modification of the ballot images in order for it to be undetectable. We're talking about the digital ballots. You can also talk about more sophisticated methods of how that can be done. But yes, it is possible.
And is it possible to change ballot images inside the computer using Smartmatic software?
No, and you have to remember that each system has its own structure. The structures are all similar when we're talking about different types of electoral software. What you can do is that you can use the original software from the provider, you search for its vulnerabilities, and then you use it to be able to change either images or data. And when I say data, we're talking about vote tallies. What the use of the system will allow me to do is to do all of that in a way that cannot be detected because you're using the same software designed for content that is not the original content. So then when you go ahead and you audit that, you have no way of showing that those pieces of data are incorrect. There's no other way unless you go and you file a case before the law. Then you appear before a judge and you get a judge to allow me to actually go and inspect the system itself. And this causes a big delay time-wise. And then this can cause the time period where I'm mandated to keep information, data stored. This time period can expire, and then you can delete this data because the period machine dated by law has expired. And so then these companies are, of course, going to claim intellectual property rights in order to disallow any detailed inspection of their source code because the only entity in charge of the elections is either the county or the Secretary of State. So this becomes a bureaucratic loop that you cannot exit from.
So true.
I was just about to say, so well said.
And on the other side of it, the people challenge it. So they can drag this out, wait the 22 or in Colorado 24 months until it's expired and then destroy all the evidence, right? Lawfully destroy all the evidence. But on the other side of that, when you're challenging them, you're given these very narrow windows with all sorts of barriers to be able to actually get this information in a court of law, to get the preservation orders for them to have to preserve them beyond the 22 or 24 months and to eventually be able to actually see them.
Yep.
It's set up. It's a bureaucratic loop that you cannot exit from. 100%.
Yep.
So I want to wrap up this deposition. I'm sorry. I'd like to wrap up this examination under oath by summarizing your testimony. And you would just answer briefly to tell me that I'm correct or incorrect. So I'd like a yes or no.
Okay.
So to summarize, is it true that the Venezuelan government paid Smartmatic to create software that could be used by the Venezuelan government to rig elections?
True.
Is it true that Smartmatic sold its software to the Venezuelan government to use in elections?
True.
Is it true that you personally set up the war room with the technology that was used to rig Venezuelan elections using Smartmatic software?
I would like to make a correction. The answer to the question as asked would be no. The reason we set up the war rooms was in order to monitor the election. The process of manipulating the election is a result of the response and that the war room receives. And then they notified the technology director of the National Electoral Council, which, according to the stories that go around, that was Leonardo Hernandez, Luis Campos, the cousin of Delchi, and Carlos Quintero, the second in command under Carlos Carvajal. So that would be the correct way, as explained. So from the Situation Room, I did not have the authority to give an order to rob an election or manipulate an election. It was the ministers or the presidents that would make the decision in those rooms and then notify of what that decision had been. And I would like to correct something regarding the prior question because I think it misunderstood it. The Venezuelan government gives the contract to Smartmatic to create the Venezuelan electoral system called SAES and financed it $250,000 US. Then the Venezuelan government bid it $140 million for them to carry out the elections. And in return of that $250,000 loan, the Venezuelan stays or keeps the software for the elections itself, keeps it, as well as the 28% shareholder interest of the company called Bizta, and both Visa and Smartmatic have the same owners. I think that meant to say Bista, not Visa. These are sister companies set up to be able to carry out an election. I just wanted to make that clarification.
Thank you. Is it true that Smartmatic then purchased Sequoia, an American company?
C.
And is it true that Dominion then purchased Sequoia from Smartmatic in 2010?
Correct.
And Eric Coomer was president of Sequoia when it was purchased by Dominion. True? Sorry, counsel. Can I get that question again? Yes. Was Eric Coomer president of Sequoia when it was purchased by Smartmatic?
Correct. Although I think that's correct.
Yeah, I want to check into that because maybe we just missed it. But
yeah, we might have.
Was Eric Coomer subsequently employed by Dominion after Dominion purchased Sequoia?
Correct.
And is it true that Dominion acquired from Sequoia the same Smartmatic software that was used to rig elections in Venezuela?
Correct. It acquired the Venezuelan system integration into the Sequoia systems. You cannot say that is exactly the same because semantically speaking, the company is going to say that that is incorrect. These are new parts of a system that are included in the new systems. This is what we call the central core, the main functionality of the system.
Is it true that when you examined the forensic images of the Mesa County election management server, you saw the same security bugs you were familiar with in the Smartmatic software that was used to rig elections in Venezuela?
The same system bugs which would be used to manipulate or change an election. And I can name what those bugs were. These were errors in the encryption system. They had the source code in legible text for any program to be able to read it and to be able to read the passwords written in plain text, which allowed you to breach the system easier.
Is it true that Smartmatic created a tool called SAES Data Utility, Data Util?
That is correct. And it's recorded that the tool is named in the studies and configuration manuals.
And that tool was created to test the element of the system within an election. Is that true?
Correct. That is its main function.
But the tool can be misused to emulate a voting machine.
Correct. To emulate voting machines.
And that tool, when it's misused, can be used to rig elections that are run on Smartmatic software.
Correct.
And is it true that SAES is the brand name for Smartmatic software?
Correct. Smartmatic software products that belong to the Venezuelan government that are property of the Venezuelan government.
Is it true that the SAES data utility is like a key to a house? If one has the key, you can enter the house undetected. When they leave, no one will know that they were there.
Correct.
And is it true that the SAES data utility was used to rig elections in Venezuela by injecting false ballots?
Correct. False votes, because Venezuela does not use ballots like the United States does.
Is it true that the Dominion voting system software architecture is essentially the same as Smartmatic voting system architecture?
They have enough similarity that they can operate in an integrated manner. In other words, they can operate gently. But let's remember that they cannot be identical for intellectual property issues. So what we do is that we integrate the functionality of the parts that we need to use.
Since Dominion voting systems and Smartmatic software architecture are essentially the same, could a data utility tool similar to SAES data utility be misused to manipulate elections in Dominion voting system voting computers?
That's correct. It's possible.
Is it true that the Venezuelan voting system created by Smartmatic used computer components manufactured in China and assembled in Taiwan?
Correct.
Is it true that the Dominion voting system is used in the United States today uses computer components manufactured in China and assembled in Taiwan?
Correct.
Under U.S. law, is it legal or illegal to use computer components made by our enemy, the People's Republic of China, within critical infrastructure within the United States?
It is illegal.
And is it true that Dominion voting systems uses computers with components made by our enemy, the People's Republic of China?
Yes, it does.
And because the Dominion voting system supply chain has not been secured to ensure that there is no foreign access or compromise of the voting system, is it true that Dominion voting systems computers cannot be legally certified for use in U.S. elections?
You cannot trust a system that you cannot buy. So they shouldn't be trusting company. They shouldn't be trusting company, whatever their name is, unless they go through an inspection. And even more so in critical infrastructure as in the electoral infrastructure, elections infrastructure.
The information that you've testified to today, have you ever given that information to the Federal Bureau of Investigation in the United States?
No.
The information that you've testified to today, have you ever given it to lawyers for the United States Department of Justice?
Lawyers? No.
Have you given this? Hello?
Can you hear me? That's interesting. Have you
Well,
given it to lawyers for the United States Department of Justice?
Yeah,
lawyers?
but we have to finish it because you stopped it in the
know.
middle of this exchange.
Okay.
So say lawyers again.
Lawyers? No.
Have you given this?
Would prosecutors be lawyers?
Yes.
That's my question. Yes, definitely. We have provided that information.
So we have provided it to the DOJ. Have you given this information to an investigator for the United States government?
Yes, part of this information, part of what I've told you today.
What year was the first time that you have given this information to any representative of the United States government, whether they were an investigator or a lawyer or prosecutor for the Department of Justice?
I would like to not answer that question because I don't know if I'm breaking any rules, because I may say that I have worked with some prosecutors and I may not be allowed to provide you that information here, because just as you are in the midst of your investigation, these other people are also doing their investigation. And I don't want you to know to create a problem with the investigations.
That's interesting.
Yes. And why I'm answering this way is mainly because I do not know what the law says. So I prefer to err on the side of caution and not answer that. I hope you understand.
I understand. Can you tell us the year that you first gave information about the vulnerabilities and insecurities in the U.S. voting system to any representative of the United States government? What year did you first give them that information?
The year would be 2024.
In what month in 2024, please?
March. It was March or April when individuals were notified.
And so after you gave this information to the United States government in March of 2024, our government went ahead and used that same voting system to run the 2024 elections. Is that correct?
Yes, I suppose that they have to validate the investigation or the information that we're presenting them. That's interesting. And I believe that this delay in them not taking action with the information that we have provided them with is because they have to first corroborate each and every one of the points that we have exposed or explained to them in our different reports and videos. So I cannot put into the question the timing of the actions of the government entities.
Sir, have you understood all of my questions this afternoon?
100%.
Have you answered all the questions truthfully?
Truthfully, totally truthfully, and only with the truth.
And were your answers based on your personal knowledge?
Yes, very much.
Thank you very much.
So this part right here intrigues me. So let me try and...
Well, it seems if it's the same whistleblower as 2020, the whistleblower was never able to get to the U.S. government in 2020. So the Sidney Powell whistleblower that she had and the corroborating affidavits and stuff that they were talking about in 2020, President Trump's administration was in charge in 2020, but the FBI and the DOJ never spoke to the whistleblower. Now we don't know if it's the same whistleblower. It sounds like the same whistleblower, but
so I asked my people if anybody could get in touch with Sidney Powell and validate this, and they didn't go directly to her, but people that are in, knowledge, and they said this sounds very much like what they were told. So I'm not going to, I don't want to put words in anybody's mouth, but
yeah.
When he says the Department of Justice, prosecutors, lawyers, and all that stuff, my theory has always been that this went to DOD, not DOJ. 2020, November 16th, my whole Phoenix Air 232 going to Gitmo with the 305 down in Gitmo and all that stuff. I buy into that wholly. And it's also interesting that now in 2024, this guy is now talking with DOJ, which March. April, right. March, April.
Sort of Devo-y.
Yes. And it's almost like they're getting out in front of it right before.
Well, they're setting him up because he notified him in March and then they used it anyway. That's the question, right?
Right. And his excuse or his reasoning for that is perhaps they needed to see it in action in order to gain evidence and gather evidence. But you're not going to just get that evidence just by this guy's testimony. I think they had to have already known how the system works and how to be able to determine this.
No question.
And that would have gone to 2020. And did they actually confiscate machines in Floyd County or somewhere around there and fly them to DC, pick some people up, and then fly them down to Gitmo and then bring everybody back home to Rome?
A lot of speculation, but maybe
a lot of speculation, but there's no other explanation for it. I mean, the company doesn't do it often. Ever.
We're out of time.
Ever. Yeah, we are out of time.
GART tickets, guys, badlandsmedia.tv/events. We did our first live stream yesterday. We haven't done it yet, but we will have done it by the time this airs yesterday. And so make sure that you get your tickets. You can watch the replay of that and join the next one that we'll have next week. We do these every week leading up to GART in Cocoa Beach. And this time next month, it will be happening. So definitely get media.tv/events, and also please smash the thumb for us. What are you doing?
I don't know why it is doing this. Like, why are the buttons on the bottom all screwed up here?
I don't know.
There we go. That's really weird. But like, look at the scenes.
Oh, I see it.
below.
I see it. It's weird.
We don't have those scenes normally. We have a lot more than that. And this is
someone's messing with our studio.
Is this John's layout? Is that what it is? I think this is all John's layout.
Oh.
Super
cool though.
This one.
Hey, hit the thumbs up for us, guys. Like button wherever you're watching us. Helps us out. Please smash that thumb. What are you doing?
People that have no idea what we're doing, but like our whole system looks totally weird right now.
Yeah, I messed up somehow in here.
All right, thank you
we gotta get out
so
here.
much for tuning in. You got Only Lands coming up next in 2.5 days, or if you're watching this live in about 2.5 hours. So we'll see you guys then. Ash, thank you for covering for me yesterday and today, even though they haven't happened yet. So you might actually not have covered for me, or you might have been a complete train wreck.
Yeah, you might not want to thank me because it was terrible.
I might not want to thank you.
Yeah.
Either you destroyed my show, or they're going to be calling for you to replace me. So one or the other. We'll see what happens.
Probably the second one.
Probably not the second one. I'm going to go with probably not the second one. Thank you guys all so much for tuning in. We'll catch you later.
Bye, guys.
They say confidence starts with smooth skin. And baby, Soft Disclosure Lotion delivers.
I swear by this stuff. Like, I kid you guys not. This is the first lotion I've ever had in my entire life that, like, I don't get ashy after I put it on any part of my body. Like, my hands are always dry, and my hands have not gotten ashy without like rinsing them through water and washing them with soap since I started putting Soft Disclosure on. Like, it is Black Man approved. I kid you not.
Black Man approved. You heard him. And let's be real. If it can handle his hands, it can handle anything.
Feet are like, they get so dry, like the heels of them, it'll just kind of like flake off. Like, but with Soft Disclosure, once you put it on, like, it starts to absorb it.
Yeah, he went there. Don't worry, we won't show you his feet, but trust us, they're smoother too. Soft Disclosure Lotion is made with aloe, goat's milk, honey, and our exclusive oil blend that actually restores your skin barrier. Visit softdisclosure.com, use code BADLANDS, and get 15% off.